Thank you, Maddalena. Thank you, Francesca. Thank you so much for opening. So I'll be very, very brief because our next guest is a very special individual that I had the chance to meet as representing Milano, I guess, a couple of months ago when he was the Chief Technology Officer of Leonardo, a sponsor you should be very familiar with that has not only supported us technically, humanly, but it's just been behind the event from the beginning. One day, Roberto Cingolani is called to represent Italy to become Minister of the Ecological Transition. And he had promised us that he would had participated in the EYP talks, and he managed to do so even under such a tight schedule as Italian minister. So thank you so much for keeping your promise. It was so appreciated, and I'll leave you the floor.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to be together tonight. I feel much younger than I am at the moment, actually. So I think I have a couple, maybe 10 to 12 minutes, and I want to leave you a message that is quite strong. I spent all my life making science, developing technology. Then I ended my scientific career landing in the largest high-tech multinational company that we have in the country, and I thought this would have been my smooth end of the career. And instead, all of a sudden, I was picked up by the new prime minister and said, "You have to come, no choice." Well, so I didn't have so many choices. I accepted, and then I was appointed with this strange new ministry that is supposed to be super powerful. The ecological transition, and it took me quite a while to understand what the hell is the transition in ecology. I think I understood now. It's about 2 months that I'm working on it, and we're launching this new Generation EU program, which is 240 billion. So 70 billions will be on the ecological transition. So I'm supposed to know what we have to do, and I'm trying to tell you this because I realize this is going to be something impacting your future life quite a lot. I have three children in my family. 2 of them are in the range of your age. One is 27, the other one is 22. Well, the third is 11, so still too young. And I think what we're doing now as a states in Europe and in the world is going to impact your life so much that you better know now what's going on. So I want to tell you something about anthropogenic change that we are creating. I'm sure you heard about anthropogenic climate change. This is a combination of problems that are rising from the growth of population. In the last 150 years, we went from 2 billions up to 8 billions. So the planet is designed to host 3 billion people. So we are too many, no discussion about that. This has increased a lot the energy demand, the land occupancy. In turn, we have deforestation, production of greenhouse gases, what makes the planet like a car under the sun, covered by a dense atmosphere, absorbing sunlight and preventing infrared light to go out, and therefore we get warmer and warmer. We have two main enemies. I'm a physicist by background, so you have to forgive me, but I need to talk about formulas and numbers, otherwise I don't feel familiar with what I'm saying. So we have two big enemies. One is carbon dioxide, that we produce whatever we do. Anytime you switch on the light or you do any action, you produce carbon dioxide because you consume energy. And this increases the greenhouse effect and therefore increases the temperature of the planet. Okay, global warming comes from greenhouse gas, primarily carbon dioxide. But also we produce ozone holes because we produce nitrogen oxides. We inject in the atmosphere chromium, bromium, other combustion gases. We pollute with a number of other materials, and this is also unbalancing the atmosphere where we live. I want to give you a number just to give you the idea of what we did so far. In the period within 1750, so just before the French Revolution, and 1970, so I was at school at that time, so this were 220 years, humankind has produced 900 billion tons of carbon dioxide. That's the total generation of carbon dioxide because of combustion engine, electricity, all the discoveries that in those 2.2 centuries happened. In the last 40 years, between 970 and 2010, we have produced about 1,000, a bit more than 1,000 billion tons of CO2. So in 40 years, we overcame what we did in 220 years. And before 1750, we didn't produce anything. For millennia, we were not producing CO2, carbon dioxide, but for the breeding animals and natural combustion, so burning, that was nothing, was naturally reabsorbed by the green, by the plants. On top, we have generated big inequalities. 10% of the richest population on the planet produces 1/2 of the carbon dioxide. So 10% of sapiens produces 1/2 of the greenhouse gases. And you understand that the rest is left with very little. So this gives you a very clear idea about the inequalities that this has generated in the human population. Which are the macroscopic consequences of climate change? Of course, we increase the planet temperature. This you heard already. This in turn generates desertification. So difficulties in having agriculture, crop planting. We reduce water sources primarily because the poles are melting, and 75% of the water, more, maybe 90% of the water is there. We have prolonged drought. There's no water. We change the humidity cycle in the land, and therefore we change the rain cycle. And this is a main problem with the main threat for the fauna and for the agriculture. The pole melting and the permanent glacier melting causes increase in the sea level and acidification of the sea, because you're reducing the concentration of salt, and this in turn kills the biodiversity in the sea and also occupy the coastal area in different countries. And this is not going to happen in 3 centuries. It will happen by the end of this century. So you guys will be old people, and you will see the coast road, the coast cities to be under the water if we don't do something. So it's not something in the remote future. It is now. We have extreme meteorological events that you have seen already. And this is due to the fact that the oceans are changing dramatically the heat content, because the oceans are like the heaters of the planet. So most of the heat capacity of the planet stands in the water, in the oceans. So if we warm the ocean, we change everything else. Now, the first thing we have to do, we have to mitigate those problems. We will not go back. So these are irreversible phenomena. There's no possibility to go back. The only possibility we have is to mitigate what we did so far. And I'm sure you heard about the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement has established that we should try to keep the increase of temperature below 2 centigrades, possibly below 1.5 by the end of the century. Otherwise, all the phenomena I was describing shortly to you before will become dramatic and completely reversible, even not impossible to mitigate. So what is the primary number you have to remember? The entire humanity, the 8 billion people with this GDP religion that we have, the model of economical growth that we have, everything we have, 3 mobile phones per person, 1 car per person, somewhere else, nothing. The entire humanity has a budget of carbon dioxide that can be produced and introduced into the atmosphere. This budget amounts to about 700 billion tons of CO2. So let's say that if we want to match the target of the Paris Agreement, keeping the temperature below, let's say, 2 centigrades, possibly 1.5 by the end of the century, or by 2050 would be ideal, we cannot inject more than 700 billion tons of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. You know how much carbon dioxide we produce every year in the planet? Okay, I tell you, 51 billion tons, around 50. So having a budget of 700, it means we have an equivalent of 14 years of the present production. We cannot make it because we have to decarbonize by 2030. So we have to reduce dramatically the CO2 we create. And we create CO2 by creating energy, producing energy, driving the cars, transportation, by running the industries, and by running our houses because of heating, and everything dealing with our normal activities. So this means a radical change in our lifestyle, radical change in energy production, radical change in life standard, radical change in public and private transportation, radical change in manufacturing. Now, how good we are in managing this budget is unclear. If we don't slow down the production of carbon dioxide now, we're going to burn most of the budget in the next 3-4 years. As I said, we have 700. We produce 50 every year. The 700 should last for at least 20 years. So no way. We have to slow down our CO2 production. In order to slow down the CO2 production, we have to change everything. If we're not able to do this now, and this is the transition, if we don't start now, we will consume most of the budget in the next 3-4 years. Then we will be left with very little budget. So what can we do at that point? Shut down everything. Crazy. So this is going to be like we continue to grow. We don't stop now. We don't slow down now. And then one day we say, hey, we finished. If we continue to produce CO2, we're going to destroy everything. So shut down everything. It's a sort of lockdown. That means stopping everything. We cannot make it, guys. You want to have a job, you want to have a house, you want to have a family. This would be your problem. So my generation gave you a very bad future, I realize. But now you have a problem. And the only thing we can do now is to set up the right condition to slow down the process and mitigate the problems we have now. That's why we should start now in reducing our greenhouse gas production and in having a sober, a better, a more intelligent way to live, to organize society, to manage the energy, the production, and so on. Another point is that this problem is not local. This problem is global. Europe is making a awful effort in reducing its carbon fingerprint. We are making a terrific effort economically and even in the job market to try to become decarbonized by 2050. So no CO2 production by 2050. This is a big sacrifice for all of us, starting from our industries that have to invest a lot to reduce carbon dioxide. But you know how much carbon dioxide Europe is producing? No. 10% of the global CO2 comes from Europe because Europe is already virtuous. So now imagine after all this effort, in 2050, Europe is completely decarbonized, but the rest of the world simply doesn't care. So any big country can say, okay, I don't care. And then our effort will be immediately canceled out. This 10% of carbon dioxide can be compensated in negative terms by any other country who's not pursuing the same strategy. So what I'm telling you is not only a must for all of us, and especially Europe that is so sensitive to environmental issues, but it must be shared by all the others. And now this is a problem in the problem, because you have to convince China, Brazil, India, recently United States, before Mr. Biden became the president, because I think you remember in the previous administration was not very attentive to climate problems. Now that we, at least the richest countries, are aware of the problem, we have to convince the others. And on top, we have to remember that there are many countries that have no possibilities to participate in such an expensive effort. So we have to help those countries. So we have three things. Ourselves, we have to be very smart in managing our CO2 budget and our environment. Second target, we have to convince all the others that this is a common problem. If China or any other country pours a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, we're going to have the climate change also in our country, and vice versa, of course. I'm not saying anything against China. China is doing a good job now. They started to do well, but everybody should share the objective. And third target, we have to help the weakest countries, those having no possibility to invest for the weather because they don't have the water, they don't have food, they don't have an economy. So this is a triple effort. This is a transition, guys. Transition means inherently to go from A to B, starting point and final point in a specific lap of time, let's say 10 years, 20 years. So it's time dependent. But unfortunately, the starting point is not the same for everybody. We start from different positions. Things that are easy for us can be paramountly difficult for other countries. But the final point has to be the same for everybody and at the same time. You understand what is the transition? That's why I'm not sleeping anymore, now that I understood what I have to do with the new government. Let me give you some numbers again. In the last 10 years, the economical and the social impact of the disasters that were generated by anthropogenic climate change, so unexpected storms, hurricanes in areas that were always very quiet in terms of weather, have caused damage, total damage for $1.4 trillion. So $1,400 billion. They affected about 2 billion people, and they had about, they caused about 0.7 million deaths. About 700,000 people died because of those unfortunate climate and catastrophic events. Now you understand that this is something that we can measure now. This money should not be paid to fix the problem after the problem has occurred. This money should be anticipated to prevent the problem. So prevention now is the key word for the transition. We have to put in place all the measures, all the actions to avoid this will grow in the future. So changing transport, changing the way we produce energy, changing manufacturing, reduce carbon intensity of all our activities, develop low-cost, low-carbon energy and battery technologies. That's a must. It means technology effort. It means new way to move, new way to manage the society. Improve crop yields. That doesn't mean occupy more land, because we don't have any more land. We have to improve crops cultivation, and of course reducing chemicals and restoring a more biological approach to food. Reduce food waste. Maybe you don't know, but we waste every year 30% of the food that has been produced. 30% of the food is wasted. And you know, this is also an incredible amount of carbon dioxide that we pour in the atmosphere because we produce that food. So we need there is a manufacturing pipeline behind. So we contribute to the greenhouse gas, and then we throw away the food. And that food could possibly feed 1 billion people having no food at all. So imagine how bad is the way we manage our system, our land, our planet, and everything. And these are not things that require big measures. These things only require education. Don't throw away the food. Buy the right thing. Careful with how you manage your refrigerator. That's nothing. In conclusion, after having told you about the anthropogenic climate change, a few words about the second big impact, that is demography. As I said, we grew up to 8-point-something billion people. The planet has difficulties in standing all that pressure. The first consequence is the uncontrolled use of natural resources that is increasing continuously. And the circular economy is not pursued well enough. We need more circular economy, more regeneration, more recycling, because we are stressing the planet. 90 billion tons of natural resources have been used in 2017, so a few years ago. These are the most recent United Nations data that are certified, by far more than in the year 2000. But unfortunately, high-income countries consume 10 times as much the poor countries. So you see, the imbalancement is terrific. The planet biocapacity is such that if we had 1.7 hectares per human, per person, we would be in equilibrium. But we don't have this because the density of humans is higher. And as a result, July every year, we finish the natural resources for that year, and we start consuming the natural resources of the new year, the next year. That means that we are living under an environmental debt. So not only we have the economical debt, of which we are all specialists, but now we have an ecological debt. We're not going to fix this. And I used to say that we have a third debt coming that is due to the social, the digital social. We have now a cognitive debt because of the way we are interacting, studying, discussing, and learning. But that's another story. The planet biocapacity is absolutely overcome by the present life standard we have in the rich countries. And on top of that, we have such an inequality that this is true only for us, guys. For about 20% of the global population, the remaining 80% is not doing so well. And they are living with much less than 1.7 hectares, unfortunately. Waste cycle is becoming a major issue globally. And you know about marine pollution, trafficking of waste from rich countries to poor countries, dump sites that don't work everywhere in the world. I think there are something like a few hundred mega cities that are producing 60% of the GDP, of the global GDP. But one half of those, they have no urban planning, they have no properly managed waste sites. So then you find plastics in the river. We produce 300 million tons of plastic every year. Most of this goes into the river, biodegrades in about 1,000 years. No human survived to a piece of plastic so far because plastic was invented in 1950. And this plastic from the rivers goes into the ocean, and then the currents in the ocean are accumulating the plastic in the plastic islands in the Pacific Sea and elsewhere, and they stay there for centuries. And due to specific degradation, small plastic can float, dense plastic goes down, sinks. Fishes are eating plastics, we eat fish, and at the end of the day, we are eating plastic. Guys, this is a terrific picture. It's not good at all. We didn't do a good job, as I said, and we're passing you not a nice, convincing future. So I want to conclude just saying, what can we do with all this? Or at least, what can you do with all this? First of all, competence, study. You have to understand why things happen. In the future, you will have new jobs that today do not exist. Energy manager, memory manager, environmental architect, 3D printing, but not the one you know now. We will print biological organs. We will print food, very likely. We have frontiers in the space where we will find maybe new sources and new land. But first of all, you have to study how to protect the environment, how carbon sequestration occurs, how the waste can be processed, how energy can be produced and managed in a less offensive way. Guys, this is all science. Don't be afraid of what you don't understand. Just study it. That is the trick for the future. And I think you'll be able to make a better job than we did so far. Thank you, guys.